Fame can feel like a spotlight that never cools, and for some of comedy's biggest names, the heat became unbearable once the laughter faded. Behind the applause were private battles, broken families, addiction, controversy, and pain that rarely matched the cheerful images audiences saw on stage and television. Jerry Lewis spent decades in front of cameras, especially during his annual Labor Day telethons for the Muscular Dystrophy Association. 4 hours at a time, sometimes close to a full day without rest, he laughed, cried, and pleaded with viewers to donate. Over more than half a century, the telethons raised around $2.6 billion. To millions of families, he felt like a relative visiting their living rooms once a year. Yet his private life told a different story. In 2012, when he arranged his will, he excluded all 6 children from his first marriage and their descendants, leaving them nothing. His son Gary later described him as cold and unaffectionate, saying the decision felt like a final act of distance. Lewis never publicly explained why he cut them out. After his death in 2017, additional stories resurfaced from actresses who accused him of inappropriate behavior on set, claims that had long been dismissed during his lifetime. At the same time, disability rights activists criticized the telethons themselves, arguing they portrayed disabled people as objects of pity rather than individuals with strength and independence. A group of former poster children called Jerry's Orphans protested outside studios, saying the message of charity overshadowed dignity and rights. The public image of a tireless fundraiser existed alongside unresolved family wounds and growing criticism. Richard Pryor's life carried its own devastating chapter. On June 9, 1980, at his home in Northridge, California, he suffered severe burns after a fire erupted while he was freebasing cocaine. Some accounts say he poured high-proof rum over himself and lit a match. Others describe an explosion caused by drug use. What is certain is that he ran from his house engulfed in flames, sustaining second- and third-degree burns over much of his body. He spent 6 weeks recovering in the hospital. Pryor had been spending enormous sums on cocaine, and addiction had consumed his daily life. The fire marked a turning point. Though he survived and returned to performing, the scars, both physical and emotional, remained with him, reshaping his comedy and his outlook. Lenny Bruce, a pioneer who challenged censorship and pushed the limits of free speech, faced relentless legal battles throughout the early 1960s. Arrested multiple times on obscenity charges, he endured trials that drained him financially and emotionally. In 1964, he was convicted in New York, a decision that severely limited his ability to perform. By 1965, he was nearly bankrupt. On August 3, 1966, he was found dead in his Hollywood Hills bathroom at age 40. The medical ruling determined acute morphine poisoning, widely considered an accidental overdose. The same day, a foreclosure notice had arrived for his home. Decades later, in 2003, New York Governor George Pataki granted him a posthumous pardon for his obscenity conviction, acknowledging the broader implications for free speech. Recognition came long after the personal toll had been paid. Chris Farley brought explosive energy to the 1990s, becoming a standout performer on Saturday Night Live and in films. His physical comedy and exuberance made him a fan favorite, yet he struggled with depression and addiction. He cycled through rehab programs repeatedly, trying support groups, therapy, and inpatient treatment. Friends warned him about the path he was on, but sobriety rarely lasted. In December 1997, after days of heavy drug use, he was found dead in his Chicago apartment at 33. The cause was a speedball overdose, a mix of cocaine and morphine, compounded by heart problems and years of strain. His death echoed that of his idol John Belushi, who had died in similar circumstances at the same age. Farley's boundless on-screen joy contrasted sharply with the turmoil he carried in private. Freddie Prinze rose to fame quickly in the 1970s as the young star of Chico and the Man. By his early 20s, he was one of television's most recognizable faces. Behind the success, however, he battled depression and substance use. On January 28, 1977, he made a series of phone calls to loved ones expressing despair. He then shot himself in his apartment and died the following day at age 22. Although his death was officially ruled a suicide, a later civil case determined it was medication-induced and accidental, a decision that affected insurance claims. His story remains a stark reminder of how sudden fame can overwhelm someone still finding their footing. Roseanne Barr built a career on brash humor and blunt honesty. In the 1990s, she spoke publicly about living with dissociative identity disorder, which she attributed to severe childhood trauma. She described experiencing multiple personalities and undergoing therapy to integrate them. Her career, however, was repeatedly marked by controversy. In 1990, while singing the national anthem at a baseball game in San Diego, she delivered an intentionally exaggerated performance that ended with a crude gesture, sparking national outrage. Years later, a satirical photo shoot that invoked Nazi imagery generated further backlash, with critics arguing that certain subjects should never be treated as jokes. Supporters called it satire. Detractors called it offensive. The debates followed her for decades, shaping her public image as someone who often crossed lines. Peter Sellers, celebrated for roles that showcased extraordinary versatility, struggled in his personal relationships. His children later described him as emotionally volatile, alternating between charm and cruelty. In his will, he left the majority of his estate to his fourth wife, granting his children only modest sums. Accounts from former partners painted a picture of insecurity, control, and unpredictable moods. The man who created unforgettable comic characters left behind a complicated legacy within his own family. Milton Berle was once known as Mr. Television, a towering figure in early broadcast history. Yet he developed a reputation among fellow comedians for borrowing or outright taking material from others. While joke sharing had long been part of vaudeville tradition, many peers accused him of crossing ethical lines. Stories of offstage misconduct and inappropriate behavior also circulated over the years, adding to a more troubling portrait behind the genial public persona. Andrew Dice Clay rose in the late 1980s with a deliberately provocative act built around crude nursery rhyme parodies and confrontational humor. He cultivated a brash persona that reveled in offending critics, targeting women and minorities in routines that sparked protests and bans. His appearance at the 1989 MTV Video Music Awards led to his lifetime ban from the network, and his 1990 stint hosting Saturday Night Live drew boycotts from cast members and musical guests. Clay defended his material as character-driven performance, but backlash overshadowed much of his career. These stories reveal the fragile line between public laughter and private suffering.